To many people, origins of Indian society, origins of Indian society are uncomfortable. Many just don't like the way the society is formed at all. Because of which textbooks also don't say clearly how Indian society is formed. What is uncomfortable about Indian society? Essentially, like any nation, this is a land of migrants. Migrants. I would say like any nation, maybe outside Africa. A nation is the result of certain migrations. India is no exception. So there are waves of migrations to India. And also this side. And Indian society, or the chief features of Indian society, are formed in such a way that very recent migrants created a system by which they dominate the people who came long ago, came much earlier. So the elite is more recent and it is dominating the very old. But then the elite says this is ours and gives the impression that they have been here all through. Okay. I am referring to castes. Higher castes are closer to the people who came recently to India compared to the people who have been there for much longer. So the recent migrants dominate the rest. So many don't like this. So let me explain how Indian society is formed in terms of waves of migrations. First migration is Africans. First modern Homo sapiens or modern humans came around 120,000 years ago from Africa. But the people who came 120,000 years ago did not leave any lineages. So the present day Indians are descendants of not the Africans who came at this time, but later, 65,000 years ago. They started from Africa around 70,000 years ago. So the first wave of migration is from Africa 65,000 years ago. Very, very long. Okay. I am going by the account given in Tony Joseph's book, Early Indians. Okay. Tony Joseph calls these people first Indians. Essentially, if you are calling the people by the origin of the place from which they are coming, you should call them Africans. And if these people are first Indians, then in Bangladesh they should be called first Bangladeshis. In Myanmar they should be called first Burmese, like that. So here we can call them Africans. So first wave of migration that took place 65,000 years ago was from Africa. And this is true of other countries also. Everybody outside Africa now can be traced to a group of people who migrated from Africa around 70,000 years ago. What is called out of Africa theory. The world is populated by people who left around a particular time Africa. That includes even going to South America through a land bridge from Siberia to Alaska and moving towards South America. And that includes Australia. So everybody is from Africa, and India is no exception. Okay, so that is one. So the first thing is, you can say, African component. And second thing is, our second wave of migration is not covered well in history books. One major credit that should be given to early Indians is that it paid attention to this second wave. This second wave is from Iran. Iranians. History textbooks covered a lot about Aryans but not Iranians. Because in history textbooks, there were natives, Aryans came, and there was Harappan civilization which was discovered later. And books don't tell us what happened to Harappans and who were the people. We didn't know. But recent genetic evidence throws light on who are these Harappans and what happened to them. Harappans are none other than those consisting of Iranians plus the people who are staying there, African component. So if you want, you can call them first Indians. So first Indians plus Iranians constituted Harappans. This is one very important discovery. How do we know this? By the data from ancient DNA. Ancient DNA. Okay, let me show this. So this is how the Africans who came 65,000 years ago might have looked like. These are present day Oranges, present day oranges, compared to any other group, look more closely to Africans. So this is it. Next, Iranians. A DNA study of 612 individuals conducted by 92 scientists from various disciplines all over the world say that they found 3 individuals from Indus periphery closer to Indus Valley civilization and who lived between 3100 BC and 200 BC. So these people have African plus Iranian ancestry. So Harappans consists of African plus Iranian. Okay. And then another 41 individuals from Swat Valley, dated between 1200 to 800 BC, also have this African plus Iranian ancestry, which means 44 individuals have Iranian ancestry. We don't know the ancient DNA from the sites of Harappan civilization. So that's why we are discussing Indus periphery, which are closer, in which Indus Valley people had trade links. So Iranian ancestry is revealed from the ancient DNA studies. But how did Harappan civilization itself evolve? It evolved from, surely civilization evolves from smaller Neolithic settlements. And before Neolithic, there would be Mesolithic and other stages. So it all evolved over a period of time. Mehragar, presently in Balochistan, was inhabited between 7000 to 2600 BC. So it was well developed, and then later Mehragar is not part of Harappan civilization, but around that Harappan civilization took place, and Harappan civilization divided into 4 stages, starting from 4000 BC to its decline 1300 BC. So civilization is around 7000 plus, and Iranian contribution is around this. So Iranians were there bringing agriculture and contributing to civilization around 7000 plus. Around, if this is 65,000, this is 7,000. So huge gap. Okay, so these people contributed to the civilization. History books so far did not throw much light on what happened to Harappan civilization. This book says Harappan civilization, in terms of towns, may have disintegrated, probably because of climatic factors. But in terms of people, the Harappans are very much a part of India, because Harappans mixed with others, mainly first Indians or the Africans. Okay. And the present day Dravidians show clearly by linguistic evidence that they came from Iran. So linguistic studies show that there are so many common words between what is called Proto-Elamite and here Proto-Dravidian. Around 100 common word origins. So 100 common word origins between Proto-Elamite in Iran and Proto-Dravidian here. Proto-Dravidian is earlier to the present day Dravidian languages like Tamil, Telugu, Malayalam, and also Gonds. So Proto means much earlier. So Proto-Dravidian and Proto-Elamite have some common word origins. And from the analysis of these words, it is also clear that these people migrated after goat and sheep domestication. Goat domesticated, so there are common words. Sheep domesticated, so common words. And also processing of grains, common words. Okay, so at the development of agriculture, people started. Some contributed to Harappan civilization here, and then that some people migrated. Maybe after the decline of civilization, more people may have come. So this is the migration route. Okay, and who were there before? First Indians. So, which means South Indian population as of now consists of South Indian population consists of first there was an African component and then Harappan component. Harappan. But what is Harappan? African component plus Iranian component. Okay. So Harappans joining First Indians or mixing up with First Indians means African component plus Iranian component plus African component. So there will be more of African component in South India. Okay. African component means it is closer to this component. So likely to be on darker side in South India. So Iranian migration is one very important migration, contributed to Harappans and then like this contributed to Dravidian. Next, third stage is Aryans or going by the region, Central Asians. Central Asians. Okay, certain things were not covered before. Let us go back. So Proto-Elamite and Proto-Dravidian similarities. Okay. So next is Central Asians. Central Asians, these people are also called Aryans, came around the later or declining stage of the Indus. So this was well known, so much that there was some speculation that these Aryans may have destroyed Indus, but it didn't happen like that. Indus Valley civilization deteriorated probably for climatic reasons. So Aryans came around the decline of Indus Valley civilization. So maybe we can say around 1500 BC. Like this is BC. So 1500 BC means around 3500 years ago. And this is 9000 years ago. Okay. And of the 44 individuals who have Iranian and first Indian ancestry, 41 which are from Swat Valley have Aryan ancestry. Swat Valley samples are recent ones. See, 3 individuals, 3100 to 2200. There are no Aryan ancestry here. 41 individuals of Swat Valley. There is an Aryan ancestry. And how can one know Aryan ancestry? One very important thing is R1AZ93 Y chromosome. That's one important thing, R1AZ93. So, so they came around 3500 years ago, Iranian 7000, African 65. Okay. Next, and if you are thinking in terms of North India and South India, this is what it seemed to have happened. Harappan civilization disintegrated, then Harappans, and then Aryans mixed here. And here Harappans and African component mixed here. So, in North Indian population, there are Harappans as well as Aryans. In South Indian population, Harappans plus African component, because of which there is more African component here. And here, Aryans seem to have dominated because, I mean, we know that in North India, it is Indo-European languages that dominate, and these are the languages of the Aryans. So North Indian domination is by the Aryans, whereas more of African plus Iranian component is there in the south. Okay. Now, how did these groups interact, particularly after Aryans came? So now you can think of two groups. North African component plus Iranian component plus Aryan component. North and South African component plus Iranian component. So Aryan component which is distinguished by R1AZ93, is the difference. Okay. And the Aryans, who are the most recent compared to Africans and Iranians, are very powerful. These people came from Central Asia, and these people moved towards Europe, and they established Aryan supremacy in Europe. If Europe is speaking Indo-European languages now, it is because of the Aryans. Aryans changed the demographic complexion. They came with fewer men riding on chariot, with horse, with military technology, metallurgy. So, though technically they are pastoralists in terms of economic categorization, but they are advanced in terms of use of metals and wheel and horse. And they seem more violent, more aggressive, because wherever they went, something was happening in which Aryan men would have more of local women, and within few generations the demography would change, which means local men were either being killed or simply there is differential access to women, to local women, between Aryan men and local men. So demography is changing, Y chromosome is changing, but female ancestry, which is seen through what is called mtDNA, female ancestry can be studied through mtDNA, and male ancestry can be studied through Y chromosome. So Y is passed exclusively along male lines, mtDNA exclusively along female lines. So wherever Aryans went, there would be female ancestry, but male ancestry would change. The same thing about India also. Male ancestry, female ancestry are not matching. Going by female ancestry, many more Indians can be traced to African component. But if you are going by male ancestry, fewer people, because migration, Aryans came and changed. So Aryans dominated, and now take for example caste system. Caste system seemed to be an interaction between African plus Iranian plus Aryan or Central Asian, okay, say Aryan, versus Africans plus Iranians, this one. Aryans main difference. Or if you are thinking in terms of recent migrants versus long ago, 65,000 years ago versus 7,000 plus. This is also one way of looking at it. Then, I mean, very reasonable, 65,000 versus 7,000 plus. So Iranians plus Central Asians are called together West Eurasians. So another way to look at India is formed out of Africans plus West Eurasians. Within West Eurasians, Iranians plus Aryans. Okay. But surely Iranians are more integrated compared to, merged with Africans, African component compared to Aryans. Aryans are much more recent compared to Iranians. 1000 BC, which means 9,000 years ago. 9,000 years ago. Okay. So now let us look at caste system. Most important thing about the caste system is that there is an interaction. Interaction could have taken place like this. Different ethnic groups maybe started interacting or mixing, and mixing went on for some generations, and after that mixing stopped. Okay, so they were mixing, and going by the cultural traditions, probably mostly the mixing takes place in terms of what is called hypergamy. Man from top and woman from lower section. So hypergamy. Hypergamy is about power. In terms of genetics, it is mix-up. There is no difference between man and woman in terms of genetics. So mixing takes place. Because of this mixing, what we know now is that this R1A is there even among SC and ST now. But the prevalence of R1A among SC and ST is only half of prevalence of R1A in Brahmins. Which means caste system can be thought also in terms of differences in R1A and R1A coming from Aryans. Which means Aryans came, interacted, and created a social system in which they are at the higher level. But so much mixing took place. We cannot now say only Brahmins are Aryans, and the lowest are definitely others. We can't say that. A lot of mixing, but differential mixing, so that the prevalence of R1A is different. So what does that mean? That compared to these three groups, Africans and Iranians and Central Asians or say Aryans were the most recent, only 3,500 years ago, and then they created a social system in which they placed themselves at the top. Okay. And Hinduism that we talk about is again, if you think it is coming from Rig Veda, again it is Aryan legacy. So again 3,500 years ago. So compared to the 65,000 years ago, Hinduism is recent. So it is not that India had been Hindu all through. No, Hinduism came recently. But definitely we can't equate Hinduism with Aryans. Aryans started it, but many elements mixed. Harappan elements, African elements. So much of beliefs must have mingled and finally created what we know as Hinduism. We cannot say Aryan single-handedly created this religion and imposed it on others. It is a mix-up of Dravidian, Harappan and all these things. Yoga, Shiva came from Harappan, and probably the concept of moksha may have come from Harappan. We don't know. Some very crucial elements of Hinduism may have come from indigenous sources. We can't say, but since we equate Hinduism with closer to Brahminism and starting from Vedas and later Upanishads, Aryans, we can say, played a very important role in creating the religion. And if we think that any hierarchical system is created by the people who dominate the system, you can say Aryans played a role in creation of the system. They created in a way they are observing. In one difference between Europe and India is that in Europe, Aryans went and they decimated local populations. But here, probably here, the population is huge and far more settled, because of which, instead of decimating, hierarchical system was created. Okay, so African component plus Iranian component plus Central Asian component. And these are not the only three things. And later people came from other sources. Okay, from Mongoloid race, from Chinese side and others. And much later again, Muslims, and then British, Christians, British, Europeans again. So India is a mix-up of so many groups, but these three are very important layers: African component and Iranian component and Central Asian component. Over those three components, African component is very important. And huge chunk can still be traced to African component. So by mtDNA, 70 to 90% of Indians can trace to first Indians or African component, whereas by Y chromosome, 10 to 40% can trace themselves to African component. So African component played a very important role. On that, Iranian component and Central Asian component, these three played a very important role. And over that, other people joined. So who is an insider and who is an outsider? It all depends upon the timeline. If all of us have to go back to our roots under what is called Ghar Wapsi, then all of us should go to Africa. So that's not a solution. So insider and outsider, see, some Muslims, the people who came from outside during medieval times, become outsiders compared to those who came 3000 years ago. But those who came 3000 years ago also are outsiders compared to those who came 7000 years ago. And those who came 7000 also are outsiders compared to who came 65,000 years ago. So, insider and outsider theory may not be relevant. That is not the way to look at a nation. We need to see that instead of who came when, we need to think whom do we call citizens now? And this is the way citizenship has to be acquired. And once the citizenship is acquired, these are the rights and these are the goals of political entity that we should pursue. Because everybody is an outsider in one way. Everybody is a migrant. So, and also we can't think everybody born in India is a Hindu. Hinduism came very recently compared to the history of migration. Okay. But in comparison to these migrations, the idea of India as a nation is even more recent. It came after British rule. British rule created certain borders. And some people, these groups, Hindus, claimed that British borders should be our borders. But the borders themselves created very recently. So nation is even more recent compared to society. Society at least is much older than nation. So ideal thing is to say nation is for citizens and nation has these goals and these are the citizens, rather than thinking in terms of insider and outsider and creating differential rights. Okay. Anyway, before I complete, um, recently this genetic data came about from these things. The idea that we are made up of migrants and was not to the liking of Indian establishment. And Indian scientists opposed this formulation of African component plus West Eurasian component. So this is what the science says. But Indian scientists did not. So there was politics in this process. I'll tell you. See, David Drake, who later wrote Who We Are and How We Got Here, was developing a comprehensive picture, taking data from various countries, which includes India, and Indian scientists from CCMP are involved in providing the data. The data shows this is Indian composition. But then Indian scientists didn't like it. They said that it means that all of them are migrants, or at least Aryans came from outside. So David Rick was shocked. He says, the tensest 24 hours of my scientific career came in October 2008 when my collaborator Nick Patterson and I traveled to Hyderabad to discuss the results with Singh and Thangraj. They are CCMB scientists. Our meeting on October 28 was challenging. Singh and Thangraj seemed to be threatening to nix the whole project. Prior to the meeting, we had shown them a summary of our findings, which were that Indians seem to be from a mixture of two highly divergent ancestral populations, one being Western Eurasians. Singh and Thangraj objected to this formulation because they argued it implied that West Eurasian populations migrated en masse into India. They correctly pointed out that our data provided no direct evidence for this migration, for this conclusion. They even reasoned that there could have been a migration in other directions. See, how can they reason like this? See, what we should know is that Indian migration, if you are suggesting something about Indian migration, it should be a part and parcel of the migration in the world. So, if Aryans started from India, that should be consistent with what happened to other countries, who went there and what is their status. We just can't say Aryans migrated from India and then I don't know about the rest of the world. So David Drake and others are providing a comprehensive picture, and from that comprehensive picture, it is very clear that migration took place from Central Asia. And anyway, this book talks about archaeological evidence to Rig Veda. There are some slokas mentioned in Rig Veda which refer to burials and horse sacrifice. Burials and horse sacrifice, and they are as archaeological evidence in Russia shows. It means that there is archaeological evidence to slokas in Rig Veda, which means that the people from Central Asia did come to India and bringing those slokas with them, or the practices with them. Okay, so where are we? So the next day, the full group reconvened in Singh's office, and we sat together and came up with new names for ancient Indian groups. and they are ANI and ASI, ancestral North Indians and ancestral South Indians. So ancestral North Indians are African component plus Iranian component plus Aryan component, and ancestral South Indians are African component plus Iranian component. So this is what they said. So, and caste system has an interaction between it. So ancestral North Indians, this doesn't suggest that outsiders came. Ancestral South Indians, as if that they were there here all through and they were here all through and then they interacted. If they were ancestral to North India and ancestral to South India, they would have mixed up now. So you should mention who came first and what was the interaction. So I would say they're misleading. Okay, but this is what these people have to agree to. So Indians study in terms of ANI and ASI because they don't want to say this is the component. It means that even now there is resistance to the idea that people came from outside, and those who came from outside are responsible for the caste system, and they placed themselves as elite, as the leaders of the society. Okay, so these are uncomfortable origins of Indian society. Think about it.